Tom had finally achieved his dream. After years of saving every penny and working overtime, he bought a charming brick house on Maple Street with a big backyard. The house sat right at the edge of the Sunny Oaks neighborhood, a quiet community, with tall trees and friendly neighbors. For 5 peaceful years, Tom lived happily in his home. He planted a garden, built a shed, and last spring he installed a beautiful swimming pool, his pride and joy. What Tom didn't know was that trouble was brewing. 3 years after he bought his house, the other homeowners in Sunny Oaks decided to form a homeowners association, or HOA for short. They sent letters to everyone in the area, including Tom, asking them to join. Tom read the papers carefully. The HOA wanted monthly fees and had strict rules about house colors, lawn care, and what people could put in their yards. No thanks, Tom thought. He wrote a polite letter back explaining that his house was actually outside the Sunny Oaks boundaries according to the county records. Plus, he had bought his house before the HOA existed. The HOA sent a few more letters over the years, but Tom always said no. Then came that Saturday morning that changed everything. The air was warm with early summer heat as Tom sat on his back patio drinking coffee and reading the morning news on his tablet. Birds chirped in the nearby trees and the morning sunlight sparkled on his pool water. Tom looked forward to a quiet weekend of gardening and maybe having his brother's family over for a barbecue and swim. As he reached for his coffee mug, something caught his eye, movement by his back fence. Tom lowered his tablet and looked more carefully. A woman with short blonde hair was standing on something to peer over his 6-foot privacy fence. More shocking still, she was holding up a phone, clearly taking pictures of his backyard and pool. "Hey there," Tom called out, standing up quickly. "Can I help you with something?" The woman's eyes widened like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Without saying a word, she stepped down from whatever she was standing on and quickly walked away. Tom heard the click of heels against the sidewalk fading into the distance. That was weird, he muttered to himself. Tom tried to shake off the strange feeling as he went about his weekend, but something about the incident bothered him. Why would someone be taking pictures of his property? 3 days later, Tom found out why. He was sorting through his mail after work when he spotted an official-looking envelope with Sunny Oaks Homeowners Association printed across the top in bold letters. Curious and slightly worried, he opened it right at his kitchen counter, not even bothering to sit down. Inside was a letter on fancy letterhead signed by someone named Linda Prescott, who called herself the Sunny Oaks HOA president. Tom's eyes widened as he read, "Dear Mr. Henderson, it has come to our attention that your backyard and recently installed swimming pool are encroaching on Sunny Oaks HOA common property. Furthermore, the pool was installed without proper HOA approval and violates several of our bylaws regarding backyard structures. As you are subject to our HOA regulations, we demand immediate compliance with our architectural guidelines, enclosed, and payment of 3 years' worth of backdated HOA membership fees, totaling $4,500. Failure to comply within 30 days will result in legal action and additional fines of $100 per day. Sincerely, Linda Prescott, HOA President." Tom nearly dropped the letter. His hands shook slightly as anger and confusion washed over him. "This is crazy," he said out loud to his empty kitchen. "I never joined their HOA. How can they claim my backyard isn't even mine?" He read the letter again, thinking there must be some mistake. But no, it clearly stated that they believed his backyard and pool, the pool that cost him $30,000 and months of construction, were somehow on HOA property. And they wanted thousands of dollars from him? Tom placed the letter on the counter and took a deep breath. Then he marched to his home office and pulled out the file where he kept all his important house documents. Inside was the property deed, the original survey from when he bought the house, and all the permits he'd gotten for the pool installation last year. He spread the papers across his desk and studied them carefully. The property lines were crystal clear. His land extended 85 feet back from the street, including the entire backyard where his pool now sat. There was absolutely no question about it. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Tom muttered. "Or worse, a scam." He remembered the woman taking pictures a few days earlier. That must have been this Linda person, or someone working with her. The thought of strangers spying on his property made his skin crawl. Tom grabbed his phone and called his friend Jack, who lived a few houses down. "Hey Jack, quick question. Do you know anything about this HOA president Linda? Blonde hair, probably in her 50s? Oh, you mean HOA Linda?" Jack laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Some folks around here call her HOA Karen behind her back. Why? Has she come after you now?" Tom's stomach sank. "Yeah, she sent me a letter claiming my backyard and pool are on HOA property and that I owe them $4,500 in back fees, but I never joined their HOA." Jack sighed heavily through the phone. "Man, I was afraid this would happen eventually. Linda's been on a power trip ever since they elected her president last year. She's been harassing people about everything from trash can placement to the color of their mailboxes. But this is a new level, even for her." As Tom hung up the phone, he looked out his window at the backyard he had worked so hard to create. The beautiful pool that his nieces and nephews loved to splash in during summer visits. The garden beds he had built with his own hands. No way was he going to let anyone take this from him or force him to pay for something he never agreed to join. Tomorrow he would gather all his documentation and fight back against this ridiculous claim. But as he tried to sleep that night, Tom couldn't help wondering, how far would this Linda person go to get what she wanted? The next morning, Tom wasted no time. He scanned all his property documents, attached them to a polite but firm email, and sent it to the HOA email address listed on the letter. He explained that there must be some misunderstanding since his property deed and survey clearly showed that his entire backyard, including the pool, was on his own land. He also reminded them that he had never signed any HOA membership papers, and since his house predated the HOA's formation, he was not obligated to join. "I'm sure we can clear this up quickly," Tom wrote at the end of his email. He truly believed it was just a mix-up that could be resolved with clear communication. Boy, was he wrong. 2 days passed with no response. On the third day, Tom was heading out to work when he noticed a group of people gathered at the end of his street. As he drove closer, he realized it was Linda Prescott talking to several neighbors and pointing toward his house. They all turned to stare as he drove by. Tom gave an awkward wave, but only one person waved back. That evening, his neighbor Jack called him. "Hey Tom, thought you should know. Linda's called an emergency HOA meeting tonight about what she's calling the Henderson property violation. She's telling everyone your pool is built on land that was supposed to be a community green space." "What?" Tom nearly shouted into the phone. "That's complete nonsense. Why wasn't I invited to this meeting if they're discussing my property?" "Because you're not a member in good standing, according to Linda," Jack said, using air quotes that Tom couldn't see but could hear in his voice. "Look, I'm going to the meeting. I'll let you know what happens." True to his word, Jack called Tom later that night. The news wasn't good. Linda had shown maps of the neighborhood to everyone, maps that Jack thought looked strange. "I don't know, man. I've lived here for 10 years and the boundaries she showed don't look right to me. She's got everyone believing your backyard was always meant to be part of some planned community garden area." A knot formed in Tom's stomach. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This was deliberate. But why would Linda target him specifically? What did she have to gain? The next morning, Tom found his answer in his mailbox, an invoice for $4,500 in back dues, plus a new charge, a $250 administrative fee for handling the property dispute. There was also a note suggesting that if payment was made in full, within 7 days they might reconsider the requirement for him to remove his pool. "This is extortion," Tom muttered as he crumpled the paper in his fist. Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. Tom came home from work to find bright orange violation notices taped to his fence. Someone had stuffed HOA rule booklets in his mailbox, his email inbox filled with messages from Linda about community standards and property values. Then, one Saturday, Tom returned from grocery shopping to find Linda herself standing in his backyard with 2 other people. They had measuring tapes stretched across his lawn and were taking notes on clipboards. One man was taking photos of his pool equipment. Tom dropped his grocery bags on the driveway and rushed through his side gate. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "You're trespassing on private property." Linda looked up, completely unfazed. She wore large sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat as if she were on some kind of inspection tour. "Actually, Mr. Henderson, according to our records, this area is HOA common space that you've illegally fenced in. We're simply documenting the encroachment." "That's absolute nonsense, and you know it," Tom said, trying to keep his voice level despite his racing heart. "I've sent you copies of my property deed and survey. This is my land, fair and square. Now please leave immediately before I call the police for trespassing." The two people with Linda looked uncomfortable, but Linda just smiled coldly. "Go ahead and call them. We're conducting official HOA business." Tom pulled out his phone. "Fine. Let's see what they have to say about this." Only then did Linda signal to her companions. "We have what we need for now. But this isn't over, Mr. Henderson. The HOA will be taking legal action if you continue to refuse to comply." She walked past Tom, bumping his shoulder slightly as she went. After they left, Tom noticed they had left behind one of their papers. It was a printout of what looked like the neighborhood layout, but Tom could clearly see that someone had altered the boundary lines with digital editing. In this version, part of his backyard was labeled Phase 2, Community Garden Space. Tom's hands shook with anger as he called Jack. "You won't believe what just happened." After telling Jack about the confrontation, his friend sighed heavily. "She's out of control, man. And I hate to tell you this, but I've been hearing rumors that she's telling people you never got proper permits for your pool. She's saying it's a safety hazard and liability for the neighborhood." "But I did get permits. The city inspected everything," Tom protested. "I know that, but not everyone does. Listen, this might be about more than just power tripping. Remember how the HOA was trying to get approval to build a community pool? The budget got voted down 3 times because people didn't want to pay extra fees. I'm wondering if Linda sees your pool as a way to solve that problem. If she can somehow claim your pool is on community property, she could make it the HOA pool without having to build one," Tom finished, the realization dawning on him. "That's insane." But the true insanity was just beginning. The next week, during the hottest days of summer, Tom came home from work to find his pool turning a strange, cloudy green color. When he checked his equipment, he discovered that someone had shut off his filtration system, not recently but days ago from the look of the water. That night, Tom reviewed footage from the security camera he had installed after the trespassing incident. There, plain as day, was Linda reaching over his fence to access the pool equipment control panel. She had deliberately sabotaged his pool, causing hundreds of dollars in potential damage and chemical treatments to fix. As Tom called the non-emergency police line to report the vandalism, he realized this had gone far beyond a neighborhood dispute. This woman was on a mission, and for some reason she had made destroying his peaceful home life her personal crusade. It was time to fight back, not just for himself, but for anyone else who might be in Linda's crosshairs. But how do you battle someone who seems to have half the neighborhood believing her lies? The police officer who came to take Tom's report about the pool vandalism was sympathetic, but not very helpful. "Look, I can see your camera footage shows her messing with something by your fence," Officer Rodriguez said, "but it's hard to prove intent. She could claim she was just checking if the equipment was up to code or something." "Up to code?" Tom repeated in disbelief. "She has no authority to check anything on my property. I've never joined their HOA." The officer shrugged. "These HOA disputes get messy. Honestly, this is more of a civil matter than criminal. You might want to talk to a lawyer." After the officer left, Tom sat on his back patio staring at his now cloudy pool. The chemical treatment he'd added would take days to clear the water. His peaceful backyard oasis now felt tainted somehow. His phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "Any luck with the cops?" Tom typed back, "Not really. Said to get a lawyer." 3 dots appeared as Jack typed his response. "My cousin Pete dealt with HOA issues before. Says you need to talk to other neighbors. Might not be the only one she's harassing." Tom hadn't considered that. He'd been so focused on his own situation that he hadn't thought about whether Linda might be bullying others too. The next day was Saturday, so Tom decided to do some investigating. He started with his next-door neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who had lived in her house for over 30 years. "Oh yes," she said when Tom asked if she'd had trouble with the HOA. "That Linda woman left nasty notes about my rose bushes being too tall. Told me I had to cut them down or pay fines. My roses won the county garden show 3 years in a row." She shook her head angrily. "I told her my house was here before their silly club existed. She didn't like that one bit." Tom visited 6 more houses along the edge of the neighborhood. 5 of them had similar stories. A man named Bob showed Tom a letter demanding he remove the small workshop in his backyard, a workshop that had been there for 15 years. A couple named the Patel family had been harassed about their vegetable garden, with Linda claiming it violated rules against agricultural use. Another neighbor, Dave, had received notices about his boat storage, despite having all proper permits from the city. "She keeps saying my property is within HOA boundaries," Dave explained, "but my survey says otherwise. I just don't have the energy to fight it, you know? I'm thinking of just selling and moving." By Sunday evening, Tom had talked to over a dozen neighbors. He invited the ones with HOA problems to meet at his house the following weekend. To his surprise, 14 people showed up. "I never realized how many of us were dealing with this," said Bob as they all gathered in Tom's living room. "She picks her targets carefully," said a woman named Anita. "Mostly people on the edges of the neighborhood who might actually not be part of the HOA boundaries, or people who don't speak English as their first language, or older folks who might get intimidated." "Has anyone looked at the actual neighborhood plans?" asked Tom. "The original ones, I mean, not whatever doctored versions Linda's been showing around." The room went quiet. Then Mrs. Chen spoke up. "My late husband was on the original planning committee for this subdivision, back in the 80s. I think I still have some of those documents in my attic. And I work for a title company," added a younger man named Rick who lived 3 doors down from Tom. "I can pull the official plat maps from the county records. Those would show the legal boundaries." Over the next week, the group worked together, like detectives. Rick brought official maps from the county. Mrs. Chen found old planning documents. Dave, who was good with computers, compared the original documents with the versions Linda had been distributing at HOA meetings. "Look at this," Dave said during their second meeting, placing 2 maps side by side on Tom's dining table. "She's actually moved boundary lines in Photoshop. See how this curve in the road is slightly different? And these lot lines have been shifted about 10 feet in all these properties around the edge." "That's illegal, right?" Tom asked, staring at the evidence. "Fraud, misrepresentation, possibly criminal," said Rick, "especially if she's using these fake documents to try to collect money or claim property." The biggest surprise came when Rick discovered that the HOA's own registration documents with the state showed different boundaries than what Linda was claiming. The official HOA territory covered only the central part of the neighborhood, the newer homes built after the initial development. All of their properties along the edges were legally excluded. "So none of us are even in the HOA's jurisdiction?" asked Bob in disbelief. "She's been harassing us for nothing." "Not for nothing," Anita pointed out. "Think about it. If she could bully all of us edge properties into paying dues and following her rules, the HOA treasury would nearly double. Plus there's the whole pool situation with Tom. She wanted that as a community amenity without having to build one." Tom shook his head in disgust. "We need to take this to the rest of the HOA board. I bet most of them have no idea what she's been doing." "We need legal help first," said Rick. "My brother-in-law, Phil, is an attorney who specializes in real estate law. He helped another neighborhood with HOA troubles last year. I can ask if he'll meet with us." Phil agreed to come to their next meeting. He was a balding man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. After reviewing their evidence for an hour, he looked up at the group gathered in Tom's living room. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of HOA overreach I've ever seen," he said. "The doctored documents alone are serious business. Add in the harassment, trespassing, and the vandalism of Tom's pool, and you've got grounds for both civil action and possibly criminal charges." We don't want to sue all our neighbors, Tom clarified. Most of the actual HOA members probably have no idea what Linda's been doing. Phil nodded. Fair enough. I suggest we draft a formal cease and desist letter detailing the evidence we've gathered. We'll send it to every HOA board member, not just Linda. That gives the other board members a chance to distance themselves from her actions and correct the situation. He looked around the room. How many of you are willing to sign your names to this letter? The more signatures we have, the more impact it will make. Every hand in the room went up. Over the next few days, Phil drafted the letter while the group continued gathering evidence. They collected every harassing note, violation letter, and email. They documented dates and times of trespassing incidents. Dave helped everyone check their security cameras for footage of Linda or her helpers coming onto their properties uninvited. By the time they met again to review the letter, they had evidence of Linda's misconduct going back nearly 2 years. It's time to end this, said Tom as they all signed their names to the letter. No more letting her bully us or anyone else in this neighborhood. As Phil left with the signed letter, promising to send certified copies to each board member, the next day Tom felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For weeks he had felt alone and helpless against Linda's campaign. Now, looking around at his living room full of neighbors who had become friends through this ordeal, he realized that sometimes the worst situations brought out the best in a community. Whatever happens next, he thought, at least we're facing it together. 3 days after sending the cease and desist letter, Tom received a phone call from someone named Greg Wilson, who introduced himself as the vice president of the Sunny Oaks HOA. Mr. Henderson, Greg said, his voice tight with what sounded like controlled anger. I've received your attorney's letter, as have the other board members. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss these allegations. Tom tried to read between the lines. Was Greg angry at him or at Linda? He couldn't tell. I'm happy to meet, Tom replied cautiously. But just to be clear, these aren't allegations. We have documented evidence of everything mentioned in that letter. There was a long pause before Greg spoke again. Yes, well, that's partly why we need to meet. Some of what you've described came as a surprise to many board members. Could you come to my house tomorrow evening? Bring your attorney if you wish. Tom immediately called Phil and then reached out to the rest of their neighborhood group. They decided that Tom, Rick, and Mrs. Chen would go to the meeting along with Phil. 3 representatives plus their lawyer seemed like a strong showing without being overwhelming. The next evening, they arrived at Greg's house, a well-kept 2-story home near the center of the neighborhood. Greg led them to a living room where 4 other people were already seated, the remaining HOA board members. Linda was noticeably absent. Where's Linda? Tom asked as they sat down. Greg's mouth tightened into a thin line. Miss Prescott has been asked not to attend this particular meeting. We felt it would be more productive to hear your side without interruptions. Phil placed his briefcase on the coffee table. That's probably wise. Now, I understand you've all received our letter detailing the pattern of harassment, trespassing, document tampering, and property damage. One of the board members, a middle-aged woman, leaned forward. Mr. Henderson, I'm Nancy Taylor, the board treasurer. I want to start by saying we were shocked by many of the claims in your letter. While we were aware of some concerns about properties on the neighborhood boundaries, we had no idea of the extent of what was happening, or that documents were being altered, added another board member, a gray-haired man who introduced himself as Doug. That's completely unacceptable. Tom glanced at Phil, who gave a slight nod of encouragement. I appreciate hearing that, Tom said, but I have to wonder how much oversight you've been providing. This has been going on for nearly 2 years, affecting at least 14 homeowners that we know of. Rick opened a folder and began laying out printed documents on the coffee table. These are the original neighborhood plans and legal plat maps, he explained. And these, he laid out another set of papers, are the versions Linda has been showing at HOA meetings. The board members leaned in, examining the documents side by side. Nancy gasped audibly. The boundaries are completely different, she said. This would add almost 20 properties to our HOA territory. Properties that are legally not part of your HOA, Phil pointed out, including all of our clients' homes. Greg ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. I don't understand why she would do this. The risk, money and control, Mrs. Chen said firmly. More properties mean more dues, more people to boss around, and in Tom's case, a free swimming pool for the HOA. Tom pulled out his phone. Speaking of which, I have video evidence of Linda trespassing on my property multiple times, including this footage of her deliberately tampering with my pool equipment, which caused over $800 in damage. He played the video, and the board members watched in uncomfortable silence as Linda clearly reached over Tom's fence to shut off his pool system. Good Lord, Doug muttered. Nancy looked up with a stricken expression. Mr. Henderson, did you report this to the police? Yes, but they said it was a civil matter, Tom replied, which is why we're here. We want this harassment to stop immediately. Phil took over, his voice calm but firm. My clients don't want a prolonged legal battle. They're not looking to sue the HOA as an organization. What they want is very simple. Formal acknowledgement that their properties are not part of the HOA, a written apology for the harassment they've endured, and assurance that Ms. Prescott will no longer have any authority to approach or contact them. And reimbursement for the pool damage, added Tom. The board members exchanged glances. Greg sighed deeply. Can we have a moment to discuss privately? He asked. Tom, Rick, Mrs. Chen, and Phil stepped out onto Greg's back patio. Through the glass doors they could see the board members in intense conversation with occasional glances in their direction. Do you think they knew? Tom asked quietly. Some of it, maybe, Phil replied. But I doubt they knew about the doctored documents or the trespassing. Their shock seemed genuine. After about 15 minutes, Greg opened the patio door. We're ready to continue if you'd like to come back in. When they were all seated again, Greg cleared his throat. On behalf of the Sunny Oaks HOA board, I want to offer our sincere apologies for what you've experienced. It's clear that Ms. Prescott has vastly overstepped her authority and engaged in potentially illegal activities. Nancy picked up where he left off. We're prepared to issue a formal written acknowledgement that none of your properties fall within our HOA boundaries, along with an apology to each affected homeowner. As for Ms. Prescott, Doug added, we've unanimously decided to call for her immediate resignation. If she refuses, we'll hold an emergency election to remove her. And of course, Greg said, looking directly at Tom, the HOA will cover the costs of repairing your pool equipment and any other documented damages. Phil nodded, looking satisfied. That all sounds reasonable. There's one more thing. My clients would like assurance that the correct boundary documents will be filed with the county and state to prevent any future confusion. Absolutely, Nancy agreed quickly. We'll make sure the official records are updated to reflect the correct boundaries. After a bit more discussion about timelines and specifics, Phil closed his briefcase. Well, it seems we've reached an agreement. I'll draw up the formal documents for everyone to sign, but I believe we can consider this matter on its way to resolution. As they were preparing to leave, Doug approached Tom. I want you to know, most of us had no idea this was happening. Linda told us she was just enforcing the rules and maintaining property values. We trusted her because she seemed so knowledgeable about HOA regulations. Tom nodded. I understand, but maybe in the future a little more oversight would be a good idea. A lot of people have been really stressed out by this situation. Lesson learned, Doug said soberly. Believe me. Outside on the sidewalk as they walked back toward Tom's house, Mrs. Chen patted his arm. You did well in there, young man. You stood up not just for yourself but for all of us. Tom felt a warm sense of accomplishment wash over him. He had faced a bully and won, not with anger or threats but with facts, community support, and calm determination. What do you think will happen with Linda? Rick asked as they walked. Phil chuckled. Based on their reactions, I'd say her days of HOA tyranny are over. They know they could be personally liable if they keep her on after learning about all this. Tom looked up at the summer sky, thinking about how different things would be now. His pool would be fixed, the harassment would end, and he'd made some good friends in the process. "I think," he said slowly, "we should have a neighborhood block party once this is all officially settled. Not just for those of us who fought this battle, but for everyone, to start healing the community." Mrs. Chen smiled broadly. "I'll bring my award-winning potato salad." "And we can have it at my place," Tom added, "around the pool that caused all this trouble in the first place." As they laughed together, Tom felt the last of the tension that had been knotting his shoulders for weeks finally begin to melt away. The neighborhood was buzzing with gossip the very next day. Word spread quickly that the HOA board had called for Linda's resignation. Greg had sent a community-wide email explaining that there had been serious concerns about HOA leadership and announcing a special meeting for the following week. Tom was in his front yard trimming his hedges when he saw Linda's silver SUV driving slowly past his house. She slowed even further when she spotted him, and for a moment their eyes met. Her face was tight with anger. Tom simply nodded politely and continued with his work. The car accelerated away. "Was that her?" asked Jack, who had come over to hear about the meeting with the board. "Yep," Tom replied. "Didn't look too happy." "I heard she's refusing to resign," Jack said, "telling people it's all a misunderstanding and that you're just trying to avoid following the rules." Tom shrugged. "Let her say what she wants. The evidence speaks for itself." The special HOA meeting was held in the community center, and it seemed like the entire neighborhood turned out. Tom and his group sat together near the back, watching as Greg called the meeting to order. Linda sat in the front row, back straight, looking confident. Greg explained the situation in careful terms, not naming any specific homeowners but making it clear that property boundaries had been misrepresented and that homeowners outside the HOA's actual jurisdiction had been wrongfully pressured to comply with HOA rules. When it was time for Linda to speak, she stood and faced the crowd. "I've always acted in the best interest of this community," she began. "Property values are my top priority. Sometimes maintaining standards means taking a firm hand with those who don't want to follow the rules." She turned slightly toward where Tom and his friends were sitting. "Certain people have made accusations against me because they don't want to contribute their fair share to our community. They want all the benefits of our lovely neighborhood without the responsibilities." There were murmurs from the crowd. Tom felt people glancing in his direction. Greg tried to redirect the conversation. "The issue at hand is not about following rules. It's about which properties are legally part of the HOA in the first place." "Exactly," said Nancy, standing up with a folder in her hand. "And we have clear evidence that the maps used in recent HOA decisions were not the official legal documents." She held up two large printed maps side by side. "This is the legal plat map filed with the county when Sunny Oaks was developed, and this is the altered version that's been used in recent meetings." A hush fell over the room as people craned their necks to see. The differences were obvious even from a distance. "Additionally," Nancy continued, "we have video evidence of trespassing on private property and tampering with a homeowner's pool equipment, causing significant damage." The crowd erupted in shocked conversation. Linda's face had gone pale. "That's a lie," she shouted over the noise. "I was conducting an inspection." "Of property that isn't part of the HOA?" Doug asked pointedly. "With no notice, no permission, and no authority?" From there, things moved quickly. When Linda realized the entire board was united against her, she tried a different approach, claiming she had been set up and that Tom and the others were trying to destroy the community. But with each accusation, the board countered with documented evidence. Finally, Greg called for a vote. Those in favor of removing Linda Prescott from her position as HOA president effective immediately, nearly every hand in the room went up. Those opposed? Only Linda's hand and two others rose. "The motion passes," Greg announced. "Linda Prescott is removed as HOA president, effective immediately." As Linda stormed out of the meeting, Tom felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a touch of sadness that things had gone so far. Over the next few weeks, the situation improved dramatically. The new HOA leadership, with Greg as interim president, worked with Phil to draft proper documentation acknowledging which properties were officially part of the HOA and which were not. They sent formal apology letters to all the homeowners who had been harassed, along with refunds for any fees they had paid under pressure. Tom's pool equipment was repaired at the HOA's expense, and the water was soon crystal clear again. The violation notices disappeared from fences and mailboxes. The neighborhood slowly began to heal. A month after the confrontation, Tom hosted the block party he had suggested. He set up tables in his backyard and fired up the grill. Neighbors from both inside and outside the HOA boundaries came, bringing dishes to share and kids who splashed happily in the pool. "I never thought I'd see the day," Mrs. Chen said, sitting in a lawn chair with a plate of food. "Look at everyone getting along." Tom smiled, watching as children played and adults chatted in small groups around his yard. "Sometimes you have to clear the air before you can start fresh." "Did you hear Linda's putting her house up for sale?" Rick asked, joining them with a cold drink in hand. "Can't say I'm surprised," Tom replied. "Probably hard to face everyone after what happened. The funny thing is," Rick continued, "she's trying to list it with HOA pool access as a selling point in the description." They all laughed, the tension of the past months finally broken. As the evening wore on, Greg approached Tom with an outstretched hand. "I wanted to thank you again," he said. "Not just for standing up to Linda, but for bringing us all together today. This is what community should be about." Tom shook his hand. "I'm just glad it's over, and I'm glad I got to know my neighbors better through all this. The new board has some ideas we want to run by you," Greg added. "Not about your property, we know that's settled, but we're thinking about ways the HOA and non-HOA residents could collaborate on some community improvements. Completely voluntary. Of course, I'd be open to hearing ideas," Tom said, "as long as everybody respects boundaries." "Boundaries are important," Greg agreed, "both the ones on maps and the personal kind." As the party continued into the evening, with string lights twinkling above the pool and the sound of laughter filling the yard, Tom felt truly at home for the first time in months. The stress of the conflict had faded, replaced by the warmth of new friendships and a stronger sense of belonging. Later, as he was cleaning up after the last guests had left, Tom's phone buzzed with a text from his brother. "How was the party? Any drama with the HOA lady?" Tom smiled as he typed his reply. "Perfect night, no drama, just neighbors being neighbors. You should come visit soon, the pool's never been clearer." He sent the message and looked around his backyard. His backyard with no question or dispute about it. In the end, standing up for himself hadn't just protected his property. It had helped create the true sense of community that Linda had claimed to want but never understood how to build. Not through control and intimidation, but through respect, fairness, and people simply being good neighbors to one another. As Tom turned off the patio lights and headed inside, he knew that whatever challenges came next, HOA-related or otherwise, he had a neighborhood of friends he could count on, and that was worth far more than any swimming pool, no matter how nice it might be.